The Tonight Show interview was supposed to be a feel-good segment about Dorothy Williams, the 78-year-old grandmother who'd gone viral for her heartwarming TikTok videos. She'd come to discuss her newfound internet fame and how she was connecting with younger generations. But when Jimmy asked what inspired her recent joy, something profound shifted in her weathered but kind eyes. Dorothy sat in the blue chair, her hands folded carefully over her purse. She'd lived through decades of keeping secrets, of carrying shame that belonged to a different era. Tonight, surrounded by cameras and an audience, she was about to reveal the truth she'd buried for 60 years. "You know, Jimmy," she began, her voice carrying the wisdom of 8 decades. "Everyone thinks I started making those videos because I was lonely. But the real reason is that I finally found something I'd been searching for my entire adult life." Jimmy leaned forward, intrigued by the unexpected depth in her tone. His experience had taught him that the most powerful stories often came from the most unlikely guests. "What were you searching for?" he asked gently. Dorothy took a shaky breath, looking down at her hands before meeting his eyes. "My son," she said simply. "The baby I was forced to give up when I was 18 years old." The studio audience grew completely silent, the energy shifting from light-hearted entertainment to something much more profound. The cameras stayed focused on her face as she gathered 6 decades of courage to continue. "Last week, I found out he's been saving lives as a heart surgeon just 3 hours away from where I've lived all these years." "This was 1963, Dorothy continued, her voice growing steadier with the telling. "I was 18, unmarried, and pregnant. In those days that meant shame for your entire family." Jimmy's expression showed deep compassion as he listened. "What happened when you found out you were pregnant?" he asked softly. "My parents sent me to a home for unwed mothers," she replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I spent 6 months hiding from our community, growing this baby inside me, knowing I'd never get to raise him." She paused, the weight of the memory clearly affecting her. "They told me it was best for everyone, for him, for me, for the family he'd go to. But they never told me I'd spend 60 years wondering if he was alive, if he was happy, if he knew I never wanted to give him away. I remember the day he was born like it was yesterday," Dorothy continued, her voice growing quieter. "They let me hold him for exactly 5 minutes before they took him away. He had these perfect little fingers and the most beautiful eyes." The camera caught the tremor in her hands as she relived that day. "I begged them to let me keep him, promised I'd work 3 jobs, do anything. But an unmarried teenage mother in 1963 had no rights, no voice, no choice." Jimmy moved from behind his desk to sit closer to her, understanding the magnitude of what she was sharing. "How did you cope with losing him?" he asked gently. "I didn't," Dorothy admitted, wiping her eyes. "I went through the motions of moving on, got married a few years later, had other children, but there was always this piece of my heart that belonged to my first baby. Every year on his birthday, March 15th, I'd wonder what he looked like, what his voice sounded like, if he was loved by his adoptive family," she continued through tears. "I'd imagine teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, all the moments I'd missed." The studio was completely silent except for the soft sounds of people in the audience, getting emotional. "How did you find him after all these years?" Jimmy asked. "DNA testing," Dorothy said with a small smile through her tears. "My granddaughter convinced me to do one of those ancestry tests for fun. 6 months later, I got a message from a match, a 90% probability of being my son. His name is Dr. Michael Crawford," she continued, her voice full of pride. "He's a cardiac surgeon at Johns Hopkins. He's saved thousands of lives, has 3 children of his own, and he's been looking for me for 30 years. Jimmy's own eyes were beginning to water. "Have you spoken to him yet?" he asked. "Last Tuesday," Dorothy replied, her voice cracking with emotion. "I was so nervous I could barely dial the number. When he answered, and I said, 'Michael, this is Dorothy, your birth mother,' he just started crying. He told me he'd never stopped wondering about me," she continued, fresh tears streaming down her face. He said he became a doctor because he wanted to save lives the way he hoped someone was taking care of his birth mother somewhere. Jimmy reached over and squeezed her hand. "What did you say to each other during that first conversation?" he asked. "I told him I was sorry," Dorothy said immediately. "Sorry for not fighting harder. Sorry for letting them take him. Sorry for not finding him sooner. But he stopped me and said, 'Mom, you gave me life twice, once when you gave birth to me, and again when you gave me to parents who could provide what you couldn't at 18. He called me Mom," she added, her voice breaking completely. "After 60 years, my son called me Mom." The audience was openly crying now, moved by the raw emotion and love spanning 6 decades. "Are you going to meet him?" Jimmy asked. "This weekend," Dorothy nodded, smiling through her tears. "He's flying here with his family. His children, my grandchildren, want to meet the grandmother they never knew existed. He told me he's grateful I made those TikTok videos," she continued with a laugh. "He said it shows him his birth mother has joy and life in her, that I didn't spend 60 years broken by giving him up." Jimmy turned to address the camera. "Dorothy's story is extraordinary, but it represents thousands of women who were forced to give up their children in a different era. The thing is," Dorothy added, finding her voice as an advocate, "I wasn't the only teenage girl who lost a baby to shame and circumstance. There are so many birth mothers and adopted children still searching for each other." She looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this and you're looking for a child you gave up, or parents you were separated from, don't give up hope. DNA testing, social media, these new tools can work miracles. And if you're judging young mothers today," she continued with fierce determination, "remember that love comes in many forms. Sometimes loving someone means letting them go when you can't provide what they need." Jimmy wiped his own eyes, clearly moved by her story. "What would you say to your 18-year-old self if you could go back?" he asked. "That she made the right choice," Dorothy said firmly. "That the pain she felt was real and valid. But that her son would understand someday. That she was stronger and braver than anyone told her. I'd also tell her to write him letters," she added with a wistful smile. "To keep a record of her thoughts and feelings so she could share them with him later. I have 60 years of wondering what I could have told him." Jimmy stood up and helped Dorothy to her feet. "Dorothy Williams, everyone," he announced. "A mother whose love transcended 6 decades of separation." The audience rose in thunderous applause that lasted nearly 3 minutes. This wasn't entertainment applause. This was recognition of love that never dies, of hope that never gives up. As the show ended, Jimmy kept his arm around Dorothy's shoulders. "Thank you for sharing something so personal," he whispered. "You just gave thousands of families hope that they'll find each other again." 2 months later, Dorothy partnered with adoption reunion organizations to help other families connect after decades apart. Her story inspired legislative changes, making adoption records more accessible to adult adoptees and birth parents. The interview segment became one of the most shared clips in Tonight Show history, viewed over 50 million times across platforms. Adoption agencies reported unprecedented increases in reunion requests after Dorothy's appearance. Dorothy received thousands of messages from birth mothers and adoptees who said her courage to speak publicly gave them hope to continue searching. Several successful reunions happened directly because people saw her story and took DNA tests. Her son Michael joined her advocacy work, speaking at medical conferences about the psychological impact of forced adoption separations. Together they became powerful voices for adoption reform. Jimmy featured adoption and family reunion experts regularly on his show after that interview, using Dorothy's story as inspiration for ongoing conversations about family separation and healing. Today, Dorothy and Michael have a close relationship, speaking daily and spending holidays together. Her TikTok videos now feature her grandchildren, showing the family that found each other after 60 years apart. The secret she'd carried in shame became a beacon of hope for thousands of separated families. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about romance, They're about the unbreakable bonds between mothers and children that transcend time, distance, and circumstance. Her 5 minutes holding her newborn son in 1963 became the foundation for a lifetime of connection that no amount of separation could destroy. Because a mother's love doesn't end when she lets go, it grows stronger, waiting patiently for the chance to embrace what was always meant to be hers.